Jungle.
Good morning. Welcome to the broadcast. This is the Morning Momentum. My name is Alfonsoh, and as usual, this is a daily compendium of local and international news, human interest stories, current affairs, and expert opinion. Let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines on the papers this morning. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. We start with the Standard this morning. The elephant in the room: Ruto takes over Raila'S AU job bid. Now, President William Ruto and Raila Odinga are leaving nothing to chance in the quest for African Union Commission chairmanship, with government taking charge even as opposition chief discloses they have agreed to cut bureaucracy and unveil a well-oiled joint drive. That's a top story beefed up for you on page 4 of the Standard this morning. On page 8, why state wants court to give nod to GMOs. Now, President Ruto, determined to push for adoption of genetically modified organisms, asks the court to throw out 4 petitions and adopt a decision that approved BT maize. That's a top story on page 8. On page 7, World Bank now falls Treasury's tax plan targets. We'll catch up with that on page 7 of the Standard this morning. And state's new push to curb counterfeits. That's business news on page 18 of the Standard. International news: how Modi's party lost majority. That is a top story beefed up for you on page 22 of the Standard this morning. Also, Kibaki friends, sons knew of other daughter. Now, this is a top story also making the headlines on page 6. And lastly, on the world of sports, more doping sanctions on the way. We'll take a look at that on page 39. Let's get up close and candid with the Standard this morning, and we start with page 2. Ichung'wa, it is not in order to revise budgets. The MP said it reflects back of preparedness in budgeting, making, and introduces uncertainties in resource allocation for programs. Now, he called on Treasury to limit supplementary budgets to at least one in a financial year. That's a top story on page 2. Now, let's take a look at the figures. The supplementary budget, 24 billion shillings reduced government expenditure for the 2023-2024 financial year. National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wa blamed the National Treasury for the shift in goalposts. You want to catch up with that on page 2. Now, let's take a look at page 3. UN calls for ban on oil, gas, and coal adverts. The World Environment Day was marked worldwide yesterday. Humanity is playing chicken with climate targets set by the 2015 Paris Agreement to limit warming to 1.5%. That is the top story on page 3. It's all about taking care of the environment. Let's take a look at page 4. Ruto fine-tunes machinery to lead Raila'S campaign for AU top job. Now, Mudavadi says team comprise highly experienced and knowledgeable officers. Azimio leaders CV being translated into 6 AU languages for submission by end of the month. You want to catch up with that story on page 4 of the Standard this morning. Moving on swiftly to page 5, UDA wars escalate in the city as party polls cause jitters in camps. Now, Gakuya claims there is a plot to subvert the will of voters. Sakaja says independents are clamoring to join his team. You want to catch up with that story on page 5. Now, the figures stand at 25 candidates. That is the number of independents who could tilt the numbers for the 2 politicians eyeing the UDA chairman position. That is a top story on page 5. Let's move on and take a look at page 6. Woman claims she is Kibaki's daughter born out of the wedlock. The woman says Kibaki's sons and ex-cabinet ministers Kenneth Matiba, Julius Kiano, and the former Income Tax Commissioner G.K. Ihiga knew about her birth. This comes as Jacob Ochola, who claims to be Kibaki's son, insisted on his case to have the former president exhumed for a DNA test. That is a top story making the headlines on page 6. Let's move on and take a look at page 7. World Bank warns that Ruto tax plans will disrupt business. Kenyans bracing for tax hikes as state seeks to bridge budget deficit. Critics say excessive taxation could kill already struggling businesses. This has been a thorn in the flesh for the last couple of weeks. And it is now in Parliament. We are waiting to see the direction this will take. Now, let's take a look at page 8. Ruto asks High Court to throw out petitions, allow GMOs rollout. Now, government cites judgment on lawyer's case that approved growing of BT maize. Petitioners are questioning legality of cabinet decision to lift ban on October 3rd, 2022. You want to catch up with that story on page 8. Let's take a look at page 9. Help majority who shun formal courts, judges told. Kome says 71% of Kenyans resolve disputes through alternative justice system. Kabarak University programs on dispute resolution, systems winning accolades. That is a soap story on page 9 of the Standard this morning. Let's move on and take a look at page 10. Name bench to hear Omtata's oversight concerns. Judge asks a CJ. Now, High Court says issues raised by Senator may have implications in all 47 counties. Omtata is accusing Governor Otuoma of refusing to share procurement details. You want to catch up with that story on page 10. Still on page 10, matters security. State roll out plans to increase police and prison officers' pay. Now, police officers may soon have their salaries increased if the new service reforms are implemented. In a statement on Tuesday, Interior PS Raymond Omolo said there is strategic framework to effectively implement the reforms. That story is augmented for you on page 10. Now, let's take a look at page 11. Kiambu tops Mount Kenya counties with 3.35 billion shillings revenue collection. Muranga came second with a collection of 716 million shillings, closely followed by Meru, which collected 671 million shillings. Nyandarua has been rated the lowest in revenue generation, with its collection decreasing by 4.2%. That is a top story on page 11 this morning. Let's move on and take a look at page 12. All eyes on politicians in fight against drugs at the coast. Reach Out Network Executive Director said politics has over the years hindered the war on drugs in the region. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua accused some coast leaders of being silent in the fight against substance abuse as youth perished. That is a top story you want to catch up with on page 12. Let's take a look at page 13. Kenya among exposed nations as global vaccine talks collapse. Treaty had taken 2 years to draft and garner support. Now, the talks failed over disputes on intellectual property rights. That story is beefed up for you on page 13. Let's still stay on page 13 a little bit and take a look at disease prevention. Now, Kenya joins Global Vaccines Initiative to boost healthcare. Kenya's accession to the International Vaccine Institute will strengthen its resolve to achieve self-reliance in vaccine production, President William Ruto has said. Speaking at a ceremony to mark the country's ratification of the IVI Treaty at the agency's headquarters in Seoul, South Korea yesterday, Ruto said increased vaccine availability will improve primary health care and support disease prevention. That story is beefed up for you on page 13 of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 14 of the Standard. That lands us to the expert opinion sentiments. Now we start with the beyond words. President and DP engaging in politics of pity. It's dangerous. Now, the rift between President William Ruto and the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is a reflection of the politics of pity. This discord is not rooted in their deeper political interests. Those were settled when major government appointments were finalized and solidified by the parliament. Let's take a look at page 14. Do you support ongoing demolitions in Nairobi? Magdalene Mumbi Chalo says we can't defy nature and win. On the contrary, Nicodemus Sakayo says no, stop messing up people's mental health. Good. Let's take a look at page 16. How employees can remain relevant amid AI revolution. Artificial intelligence has undergone remarkable evolution, transforming from a niche field of computer science to a force reshaping various industries. AI's capability to process vast amounts of data, recognize patterns, and automate complex tasks has made it an indispensable tool for business world. Now, however, despite these advancements, AI cannot fully replace human beings. You want to catch up with that expert opinion on page 16 of the Standard this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at business news. Now, state's new system to monitor counterfeits safeguard parents. Platform will enable traders to register and monitor intellectual property infringements on their products. The Anti-Counterfeit Authority has netted goods worth over 4 billion shillings since its inception. Let's take a look at another business news now. Central Bank of Kenya spares borrowers' rates increase. Borrowers have been separated the higher cost loans after the Central Bank of Kenya retained its benchmark signal rate at 13% following yesterday's Monetary Policy Committee meeting. CBK said the current monetary policy stance has reduced the threat of money-driven inflation even as banks cut loans to customers and bad loans reached record levels, pointing to a worsening debt crisis afflicting borrowers. Let's talk investments now. Asset manager Kuza portfolio hits 1 billion shillings. Kuza Asset Management now says it has 1 billion shillings in assets under management. The firm said this is primarily driven by the strong growth in its private wealth offering and unit trusts. Now, that brings us to the end of business news. There's also a shipping and logistics article beefed up for you here. And just a snippet, boon for Lamu Port as Ethiopia finally shows interest. Since 1970, when the idea to build Lamu Port was mooted, it was always Kenya's intention to have Ethiopia on board. Some good news there for Lamu County. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at international news this morning. Hope for growth as Tigray capital emerges from the shadow of war. People find some relief after many hardships, including conflict and hunger. The 2-year conflict killed as many as 600,000 people and displaced millions. Let's take a look at Nigeria briefly. Rescuers DIG for trapped miners. Now, Nigerian rescuers were trying to dig out 30 miners trapped when an artisan mining pit collapsed following torrential rains. An emergency official told AFP dozens of miners hired by a local mining company were working late Sunday in a huge pit in Galkogo village in Shiroro district when it fell in. Let's move to Italy. State fines Meta over the use of data. Now, Italy's competition authority fined global tech giant Meta 3.5 million euros for lack of transparency in its use of data and management of Instagram and Facebook accounts. The AGCM watchdog said the fine was for unfair commercial practices. Meta failed to immediately inform users registered to Instagram via the web of the use of their personal data for commercial purposes, it said. Now, let's take a look at South Africa. Minister charged in graft probe. South Africa's sports minister appeared before a court on corruption charges Wednesday as his ruling ANC party discussed forming a government after a poor showing in elections last week. Well, let's take a look at France. World's richest, more wealthy. The world has never had so many rich people, and their investments in soaring stock markets have made them wealthier than ever recorded. According to a study published Wednesday, the number of high net worth individuals defined as people with liquid assets of at least $1 million rose by 5.1% last year to 22.8 million, according to consulting firm Capgemini. Let's take a look at Asia, how Modi's party lost its majority in Indian polls. Now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will remain in office but with a substantially reduced mandate co-founding expectations of resounding victory forecast by analysts and exit polls. That's the top story making the headlines on page 23. Let's move on now and take a look at sports news on the Standard this morning. Now, what Djokovic's withdrawal from 2024 French Open means. Swiatek to renew rivalry with American third seed Coco Gauff today. The tournament will have a new champion following Djokovic's withdrawal. Let's take a look at golfing. Kiprono out to reclaim Standard Classic golf title. The former champion, Wesley Kiprono, is among the players who are out to do better in the Standard County Golf Classic Series that returns to the Par 71 Eldoret Club this Saturday. All right, let's move on and take a look at the Euro 2024. Hope returns for hosts Germany as they chase fourth Euro crown. There is renewed hope as the hosts prepare to impress in home tournament. Many were predicting an early exit for the three-time European champions. That story is beefed up for you on page 38. Let's take a look at page 39. More doping sanctions on the ways as ADAC flexes muscles. The anti-doping agency suspended 33 athletes on Tuesday evening. Increasing numbers of sanctioned athletes is due to campaign to nab cheats. That story is beefed up for you on page 39. And on the cover page of the Standard this morning is still Euro 2024. Coach Spalletti cheers over Euro title defense. Revamped Italy defend Euros crown where the World Cup dreams were made. Heroes who beat England to win the last Euros have largely been cast aside. With that story of Euro 2024, let's take a quick break here on the Morning Momentum. We come back with the Daily Nation in a few. See you on the other side of this broadcast.
Wewe ni mfanyabiashara katika sekta ya elimu, afya bora, usafiri ama unamiliki kampuni yoyote ile? Ungependa kupata fursa ya kutangaza biashara yako ili kuwafikia wateja zaidi? Usikonde. Runinga ya Younib inakupa fursa ya kupeperusha matangazo kuhusu bidhaa na huduma unazotoa kwa bei nafuu. Kwa maelezo zaidi, wasiliana nasi kupitia nambari za simu 0750344700 ama kupitia barua pepe marketing@younibtv.com. Jinyakulie leo. Younib TV, ever the best.
Welcome back to the Morning Momentum. If you are just joining us, you are rolling with the host with the most. Alfonsoh is my name. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. Let's take a look at the Daily Nation this morning. Top story, Raila, I'm not anyone's project. Now, the AUC bid, it is now all systems go after the government yesterday officially unveiled the roadmap for former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's and Kenya's candidacy in the forthcoming election of the next chairperson of the African Union Commission. At a joint press briefing with PCS Musalia Mudavadi, The opposition leader said he was ready for the continental task ahead. That is a top story making the headlines on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 2, Kenya all set to host 2024 Kiswahili Day, preparations in top gear, says Aisha Jumwa. We'll take a look at that. On page 3, children's doctor by day and DJ by night. Dr. Elizabeth Kuta isn't your ordinary medic. That is a top story also on page 3. Let's take a look at the cover page. Relief as state releases 1.2 billion shillings vaccines. Now, the Ministry of Health yesterday announced that routine childhood vaccines worth 1.25 billion shillings have been delivered. In a statement, State Department for Medical Services PS Harry Kimtai said the United Nations Children Fund had delivered BCG, oral polio, tetanus, diphtheria, and measles, rubella vaccines to the country. Let's get up close with the Daily Nation. We start at page 2. Kenya's all set to host the 2024 World Kiswahili Day. The National Organizing Committee, comprising 17 members, is in place. The president is expected to preside over the celebrations, whose proposed venue is Mombasa. That is a story on page 2. Let's take a look at page 3. Doctor by day, wizard at the turntables by night, working as a DJ and medic, has helped her build a relationship with clients, doctor says. Now, Dr. Elizabeth Kuta learned to be a disc jockey while studying for her master's in pediatrics. Now, you want to catch up with that amazing story on page 3. Doctor by day, wizard at the turntables by night. Let's take a look at page 4. I'm my own man, says Raila'S state joins his bid for continental post. Mr. Mudavadi warned that local politics should not upset the bigger cause, saying that Kenya will officially submit Mr. Odinga's candidacy for the chairperson of the AUC by June 30th, ahead of deadline set for August 6th. You want to catch up with that story on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 6. Wetangula's push to unite Western rattles ODM chiefs. Orange Party had written to its ward representatives warning them against attending the meeting. The National Assembly Speaker hosted region's MCAs at his Bungoma home on Monday. You want to catch up with that story on page 6. Let's take a look at page 7. Uber and Bolt threaten to pull out of Kenya over proposed taxes. Bill seeks to replace digital service tax at 1.5% with SEP at 6%. Ride-hailing firms say proposed taxes will lead to collapse of the industry due to losses or low margins. Let's take a look at page 7. Do away with all punitive levies, ACK Archbishop tells lawmakers. Now, Anglican Church of Kenya ACK Archbishop Jackson Ole Sapit has appealed to the parliament to scrap punitive taxes that may directly impact on the poor and vulnerable. Ole Sapit told the National Assembly's Finance and National Planning Committee that the proposed imposition of taxes will disappropriately affect those with the least ability to pay. Let's move on and take a look at page 8. Police yet to crack case of granny's body found 9 months after death. Woman's children sent her money for upkeep on her phone without checking on her. Police unable to establish if Njeri, 82, was killed or died of natural cause. Investigators recommend an inquest. Now, you want to catch up with that story on page 8. Let's move on swiftly and take a look at page 10. Limit mini budgets to one in financial year, Treasury told. Now, the ministry accused of sneaking projects into supplementary budgets. Ichungwa says judicious financial management is key to prudent use of public funds. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. Now, let's move on and take a look at page 12. Preserve the environment. NMG chief urges Kenyans. Now, Kiboro says that it is the only way the country can avert destruction and loss of lives. Of course, this is in yesterday's event of World Environment Day. Let's move on and take a look at page 14. Suicide note reveals top NIS spies battle with depression. In the main bedroom, detectives found a black notebook. Friends and colleagues say the condition worsened when Adala was moved to his new station. Now, that is a top story making the headlines on page 14. More of it is on the Daily this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at the expert opinion. Alternative justice system will end backlog of cases. These are sentiments by Shukri Wachu, and I quote, ensure alternative dispute resolution mechanisms do not contravene available legal instruments, end of quote. You want to catch up with those insights on page 16. On page 17, Kenya imperialist agent, think again. These are sentiments by Charles Onyango Obo, and I quote, if you muscle your way to being a regional geopolitical power, your president will sit either at the table or the next row at international meetings. Good. Let's take a look at county news on the Daily Nation this morning. We start with Kiambu County. Now, county-owned source revenue up 1 billion shillings as collections rise. Controller of budget says county is among the best in OSR collection. The revenue generated for the first 9 months of the current financial year was 3.34 billion shillings. Let's take a look at Nakuru County. Now, hospitals risk losing lands due to lack of title deeds. Over 200 public health facilities in the region, including the Nakuru Level 5 hospital, risk losing their land due to lack of title deeds. Now, additionally, land belonging to public cemeteries across the county has also been taken over by grabbers. Let's take a look at Homa Bay briefly. 6 prisoners hurt in road accident. At least 6 prisoners were seriously injured after the vehicle they were traveling in was involved in a road accident in Homa Bay town yesterday. The mishap that also left 5 prison warders injured happened as the inmates and warders were traveling back to Rachuano GK prison from hospital where they had been taken for treatment after falling ill, County Prisons boss Robert Basigwa said. Now, let's take a look at Trans Nzoia County. Alarm over rise in livestock theft. Farmers in Kitale have raised the alarm over the rising cases of livestock theft. The cattle thieves are said to slaughter the animals to sell their meat. All right, let's take a look at Turkana County. Teachers lament tough conditions. More than 600 junior school teachers working as interns in the county have decried the tough working conditions that they have been subjected to in remote schools. MP Peter Ewesit, a local teacher, said some schools, Mr. Peter, sorry, not MP, Mr. Peter Ewesit, a local teacher, said some schools don't have houses or are in villages without dignified housing. All right, let's move on and take a look at other county news. We go to another story here. Don't vilify Muguka, says AG on controversial crop. Dispute rages on as Attorney General calls for scientific study on effects of the stimulant. All right. Let's move on and take a look at other stories on the Daily Nation, and that is business news. Counties flout law opened 287 bank accounts in 3 months. Bungoma leads devolved units with most bank accounts. Now, the move raises accountability fears, deals blow to checking public money spending. Now, let's take a look at the figures. 1,668 is the number of accounts that counties had by March of this year. All right, let's take a look briefly at hospitality business. Now, Radisson Blue Hotel takes up EV transport. The Radisson Blue Hotel in Nairobi's Upper Hill has entered a partnership with Hummingbird Transport, a service company specializing in guest transport services on its route to going green. As part of this initiative, Radisson Blue will integrate 12 electric vehicles into its existing fleet. All right, let's take a look at some other business news. Unga Group picks insider as CEO exits. Unga Group has parted ways with CEO Joseph Choge after barely 2.5 years and turned to an insider to take up the role in acting capacity amid push to return into profitability. The Nairobi Securities Exchange listed firm announced Wednesday Mr. Choge, who joined in December 2021, exited on May 31st, and the board has picked James Nyutu as the acting managing director effective of 4th June. Well, that's the end of business news on the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at sports news on the Daily this morning. Now, Okutoi deserves slot in Paris Games, insists KLTA. The Kenyan governing body now wants ITF to hand rising African female star ticket to Olympics. The Kenyan sensation bows out of W50 La Marsa. All right, let's take a look at athletics. Kipruto handed 6 years ban, stripped of 10-kilometer world record. Kenya's Ronex Kipruto will lose his 2019 World 10,000 million bronze medal and the 10 kilometers world record from 2020 after getting a 6-year ban for doping. Kipruto's results from September 2018 will henceforth be expunged from the records and will only remain with the world under 20 10,000 meter title from July 2018 in Tampere, Finland. Let's take a look at page 37. FIVB Foundation will push the sports popularity across the world. It's amazing how these two projects use diverse means to arrive at the same goal, empowering the communities through volleyball. That is Samuel Gachirira. All right. Let's move on and take a look at page 38. Cote d'Ivoire later. Let's focus on Burundi for now. That's Michael Olunga. The match kicks off at 4 p.m. in Lilongwe, live on public TV station KBC today. Now, the little AI Al Duhail striker, wary of swallows, says stars must be at their best to win. All right, let's move on and take a look at page 39. Relentless Ronaldo chasing more glory with Portugal. Portugal coach Martinez primed for baptism of fire in Germany. Potent Portuguese forward has scored 10 goals in his last 12 international matches. Well, let's take a look at the cover page of the Daily Nation this morning. Huge sigh of relief as state secures 1.2 billion shillings vaccine. Now, President Ruto says the country has formally joined the International Vaccines Institute. Ministry source says UNICEF Gavi had refused to give Kenya the life-saving JSBS over a 1.5 billion shillings debt. At a glance, how IVI partnership with Kenya will work. Now, 5 countries where IVI has done technology transfer. Then now again, the IVI develops a vaccine and teaches a country to make it. And this makes the firm responsible for the quality of vaccine and also helps pass through regulatory hurdles. Now, with that story of Kenya joining International Vaccines Institutes, we come to today's tail end session of the Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with Younib TV, particularly the Morning Momentum here on the best youth television network in East and Central Africa. Thank you so much to also those who made this broadcast a success. Raphael Wangila behind the lens and the Chief Controller, Anifa Kavira. I have been your host, Alfonsoh. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, do have a beautiful Thursday.